Hello, everybody. Hello, hello. Greetings. Great day to all the beautiful people that joined us tonight to understand what's going on in Ivy City and with this national engineering products. Right here, you can just, follow the agenda, follow the times, and follow the slides, and you'll be hearing a lot of information, a lot of important information about what's going on currently, what has gone on in the past, and what is going on currently. I want to again thank you all for coming. Empower DC. Empower DC is a citywide grassroots organization using a whole community approach. We support in building confidence and self-advocacy with collective power, which is how we run the Cromell School. Together, we will advance systemic change in planning and land use decisions. Our work in Ivy City was inspired by our founding, which includes the historic status for Cromell, affordable home ownership, documenting community history, fought off a proposed bus depot that was planned for the Cromell site. Everybody is aware of that. Youth leadership programming and working with tenants to address conditions to prevent displacement. Help and collaborated with the community and the Office of Planning on the Ivy City Small Area Plan. Now, with the small area plan, we have opposed the height and density on New York Avenue and Oakley Street. We're currently helping build the Ivy City Resiliency Strategy Plan, and you all can come to the Ivy City Clubhouse and you can see the boards and you can add your suggestions to the boards. Also, we're going to be working on a comp plan, and today we're going to be talking about how we're going to shut down NEP. Also, we are testifying, we continue to testify various hearings. And if you're interested in helping out, please put a fist up in the air and put your information in the chat, and we will be in contact. Okay, now Ivy City was established in 1872, between 1872 and 1873, and Ivy City is one of the most historic Black communities in the district. We will now hear a video from my colleague Corey about the eminent domain, the history of eminent domain, and also the racist zoning practices.
Ivy City is one of DC's oldest Black communities. It has been a Black community for over 150 years. The roots of this community are wound up in the traditions of abolition, community organizing, and solidarity. For generations, Ivy City has been a thriving Black community filled with local leaders. Children had access to clean air and safe places to play. So how did this community also become home to a large number of industrial facilities? Why is there so much industry in Ivy City? To answer that question, we must first go through a bit of the neighborhood's history. Let's start with the 1800s. With the lone exception of Anacostia, much of DC is rural farmland. Bound by DC's two rivers and Florida Avenue, downtown Washington is the city's epicenter. Ivy City sits just beyond Florida Avenue, making it a suburb of the federal city. Ivy City was established in 1873 by a Georgetown lawyer, Frederick Jones. The land was offered at $100 apiece to African Americans seeking to build a new life in the suburbs of the federal city of Washington. Some of the earliest signs of industry are present in Ivy City's early years, as the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad Company had a track that ran along what is now West Virginia Avenue. By the 1900s, DC was experiencing a population and construction boom. Many of the bricks that were used to build the city came from the Ivy City Brick Company, which had facilities in the community and where the National Arboretum is today. In addition to the Brick Company, New York Avenue was becoming a major thoroughfare for car traffic and railroads. The racetrack and the rest of the National Fairgrounds was gone. What replaced it was a web of railroad lines, often carrying materials like coal from America's heartland. While residents had been organizing to preserve the community since 1895, it wasn't until 1911 that they formed the Ivy City Civic Association. The Neighborhood Civic Association was actively pushing the city to act in the interest of Ivy City residents. It was also active in engaging the youth through the Alexander Crummell School. Looking back, many of the residents can recall a simpler time when Ivy City wasn't bustling with apartment buildings, but was rather a rural area where community could thrive and large development was sparse.
My name is Romaine Bell Thomas. I was born in Washington, D.C., right after the Depression, which took place early in the 1930s and part of the 20s. Because at that time, we did not have a lot of apartments in this area. In fact, we didn't have any apartments when I was growing up. There were just houses, and the houses were, at some points, the houses were detached. You didn't have many houses that were really attached or row houses. And you could stand at the corner on Mount Olivet Road and look all the way across the area because it was so sparsely populated. There were just families living in these homes.
So we've covered some of the history of Ivy City and its residents. But what about the industry? To understand that, let's take a look at the national context for a moment. In the 1920s, many of the major cities across the country were grappling with the conditions of so-called slums, blight in their downtowns, and how to make their city centers more appealing to wealthier people. Local officials struggling with this new challenge created a demand for a new profession called urban city planning. The man often regarded as the father of city planning, Harlan Bartholomew, led the charge to create the first zoning policies in the country. Between 1911 and 1935, Bartholomew and his firm zoned more than 24 cities across the country. In each case, his firm treated Black communities as undesirable obstacles to progress and either destroyed them or suffocated them with heavy industry. By the time he retired in 1961, his firm would have zoned more than 500 cities. In addition to his work as a city planner, Bartholomew also helped to plan the federal interstate highway system during and after World War II. In keeping with his beliefs as a city planner, Bartholomew believed that these new highways should connect major city centers, and where these highways ran, they either cut Black communities in half or paved over them altogether. In the 1920s, Bartholomew completed DC's first zoning map. His map left Ivy City virtually untouched. Bartholomew's firm would remain contracted by the district government, however, into the 1950s. DC's second zoning map, prepared in 1936, was very different. Circled in yellow, the residential portion of Ivy City remains untouched. However, the rural land that remained from the fairgrounds was designated as commercial property, indicated in the dark blue shading. The light blue parcels are all marked for industrial use. Despite being zoned for residential use, National Engineering Products moved into the residential part of Ivy City in 1944, producing military-grade naval sealants using corrosive chemicals. In 1950, Bartholomew's firm provided recommendations to DC's government on revising the comprehensive plan. Once again, the zoning changes. Where before the residential section of Ivy City was untouched, now all of Ivy City is being recommended for industrial use. While that does not come to pass, much of the property that was zoned commercial in 1936 is in fact converted to industrial use in 1958. As the zoning changes were taking shape, the Ivy City Civic Association was actively mounting a defense of the community's heritage. In the aftermath of World War II, a quote, temporary housing project along West Virginia Avenue was slated for demolition. Roughly 176 residents were issued eviction notices as part of the demolition order. The Ivy City Civic Association, led by Deacon Lewis Crow of the Bethesda Baptist Church, banded together a coalition of organizations and government partners to ensure that the residents were not displaced without permanent housing for them to move into. While ultimately successful in relocating the families, that land was eventually converted into industrial use by the city. Fights like this were not uncommon, but the Civic Association stayed focused on preserving the community. In the late 1950s, Harlan Bartholomew struck again. He'd unveiled his plans for a regional highway system for the DMV. This plan was just a continuation of his previous practices, cutting Black communities in half or demolishing them altogether. In total, the proposal would have displaced 13,000 residents. Construction of the east leg alone would have meant the destruction of the bulk of Ivy City's homes. A map from the plan demonstrates clearly what Bartholomew thought of communities like Ivy City. However, thanks to the Emergency Committee on the Transportation Crisis, formed of civic associations and residents from across the region to include Ivy City, this plan was ultimately unsuccessful. Despite the resistance, industry would continue to pour into Ivy City, as the Hecht warehouse would be built in the 1960s. With the warehouse followed a paper factory and other industrial sites. This wave of development created much of what we know as the landscape of Ivy City today. Communities like Ivy City have faced challenges and will likely continue to face them. However, history teaches us that with organized resistance, we can do more than survive. We can indeed bend the moral arc of the universe towards the wants and needs of community. Through dedicated community organizing, we can shift the conversation from protecting Ivy City to uplifting the neighborhood and its residents.
Yes, now we know that Cat Bartholomew was something else, wasn't he? He wasn't right, and now it's time to make those wrongs right. If you want to help in any of these campaigns, put a fist in the air, and Parisa will get your information. So for over 100 years, the residents have endured environmental attacks, such as trash dumps, illegal dumping, and a trash transfer station, a freeway, and just shutting Cromell down. That was a biggie. And everything under the sun. It's like, why are they targeting the residents of Ivy City? So now what we will do is get information that will lift our community up. And again, if you are willing to help in any of these campaigns, that means Advocacy Day, hearings, writing a letter, anything, please put that fist up in the air. And if you can't do that, put your information in the chat. So NEP, the National Engineering Products, has been in Ivy City, like Corey said, for over 90 years. They produce a sealant or an adhesive, and they use cancer-causing chemicals. DOEE just a few years ago said that they weren't even aware that this place existed. If we wouldn't have said anything, that place will still be spewing. It's actually, if you ever come in the community, the odor smells like burning tar, cat pee, maybe a perm, depending on how your nose register the smell, which is a creosote, which is a cancer-causing chemical. The other chemicals that have been found is formaldehyde. They use formaldehyde in their products, and they don't have an air quality permit. How is this allowed to go on in the nation's capital? Now, it's a small family. Gail Peterson is the president, which she passed away last year. We are working with DOEE to shut it down. They want to mitigate the odors, but we want them to be shut down. And we want everybody on this call to help us with that campaign. And also, again, if we have a family that lives next door that doesn't deserve this, Ivy City doesn't deserve this place, and again, it needs to be shut down. Next, we will hear from Zooks and Dr. Mitchell. They will talk about the chemicals that is being spewed in our air from the National Engineering Products and the negative health effects.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bree. Hi, I'm Zuka Shea. I teach chemistry at Trinity, and my contact information is at the top of the slide. Because if you are interested in numbers, I am very happy to share as much as I've been able to find about concentrations of some of these chemicals in the air in Ivy City. So I've highlighted a couple of the chemicals that we know are used at or stored at that facility, and wanted to let you know sort of a little bit about some of the measurements that DOEE, the Department of Energy and the Environment here in DC has done, and also measurements done by EPA Region 3. And I'm hoping that Dr. Mitchell is also here, because I want to hand it over to him as soon as possible, because I think what a lot of you really want to know about, right, is about the health effects. And Dr. Mitchell, right, is an expert who will be able to speak a little bit to some of the uncertainties that exist around this. So starting off, one of the adhesives that's made is called copaltite, and that copaltite has in it the chemicals that I've highlighted in pink, the cresol and the phenol. Now, Ms. Bree described that coal tar smell that's associated with these molecules. And what's interesting is that EPA will tell you they have never detected any, and that does not necessarily mean that it's not there, because our noses are over 100 times more sensitive than the methods that they're actually using. So in some ways, it's good that the concentrations aren't so high that they're able to detect it using their very unsensitive methods, but our noses do register it. And it's really important, right, that we keep track of the odors and let people know about how bad this odor is and how it affects people. It leaves a taste in my mouth, sort of this tarry taste in my mouth. And what I'm concerned about is if the company does any kind of masking to use air fresheners or things to try to hide it, right, then we wouldn't notice it anymore. So both of those kinds of smells are really important things to pay attention to. Now, if you're smelling something, there's probably other emissions that are coming from the facility, and indeed there are. Formaldehyde is one that Ms. Bree mentioned. It's odorless at the levels that have been detected so far, but it definitely is coming from the facility given the data that have been released. It's consistent with formaldehyde already being pretty high in Ivy City, not surprisingly because of the traffic and also because of the rail yard smoking. Like, there's a lot of sources that can cause formaldehyde, but what we're seeing in the data is that there is an increase in the formaldehyde levels that's significant. when the facility is in operation, specifically the day after they actually make this Cobaltite stuff, which is about once a month, then there's a period where they actually leave it open. And I think that that may be one of the times when the formaldehyde is coming out. Formaldehyde is associated with cancer and also respiratory effects. And again, Dr. Mitchell can speak a little bit more to that. Acetonitrile is another molecule that's been found in emissions coming from NEP. And one thing that's really disturbing about it is that it's flammable and it generates even more toxic chemicals upon combustion. The same thing is true about methylene chloride, which actually recently the EPA has really started regulating the use of because it is being found to be carcinogenic and also toxic in other ways. And there's evidence that the facility at NEP is still storing this material on site and that it's still volatilizing, getting into the air. And so I think, again, the health effects are really, really what we want to know about formaldehyde, acetonitrile, and methylene chloride. And I think the bottom line is that the measurements that have been taken are not so high that one can say that there's an acute, immediate, right, threat to life. But what's not clear, right, it's not clear that it's safe either. And so we're registering levels that if people are exposed to it chronically, it's known to increase risks for health. But also we're dealing with the fact that we've got things that are flammable and that cause even more danger when they're on fire. And one thing that's important about NEP to know is that it actually has caught on fire. In 2018, there was a fire. And so thinking about health and safety, that we have to take that into account. Is Dr. Mitchell here? Because I want to hand this over to him as soon as possible.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mitchell. I hope that that is a good introduction for you.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. Thank you so much,
Yes.
Dr.
Yes, so thanks so much, Zooks. So as Professor Zooks indicated, there are a number of chemicals that are being emitted by NEP. Many of them are the type of chemicals that you can smell. They get into the air. They are gaseous or liquid at room temperature, and so they can easily evaporate and get into the air. She talked about creosoles, and again, that's that tarry smell. That's one of the tarry smells, and it leads to irritation or burning of the skin, eyes, nose, or throat. But more than that, it can lead to a damage of the liver, kidney, or heart. It can also lead to different types of cancer, such as bladder cancer, lung cancer, scrotal cancer, and skin cancer. Scrotal cancer is the only one of those that's fairly rare. And so, if you have cancer of the scrotum, then it might be easier to trace it back to this facility. You also may have changes in skin pigmentation, either dark or light patches on the skin from the creosoles. Formaldehyde, on the other hand, is also associated with cancers, but particularly leukemia, as well as nose and throat cancer. You may also get allergies, allergic rash, or when that happens to your lungs, you can get asthma attacks. It's also associated with miscarriages and abnormality of the menstrual periods, meaning that when a woman has her periods, it can be abnormal bleeding, painful, or abnormally long or short cycles or unpredictable cycles. Then there's methyl alcohol, which is also part of the copolite compound. It can lead to decreased vision as well as to kidney disease. And then the last thing that I wanted to talk about from copalite is the phenol. And so phenol is associated with thyroid disease, kidney disease, asthma. You may start noticing that some of these things are repeating over and over again, like kidney disease, asthma, irritation. So let's go on to another compound that they produce called pattern release. We talked about methylene chloride. This should be methylene chloride, which is associated with heart attacks. It's also associated with heart rhythm disturbances, brain cancer, decreased fertility, and also miscarriages. And then they have a number of other petroleum gases as well as liquids that they deal with. So petroleum gases smell like tar and smell like other petroleum products like oil or diesel or sometimes gasoline. And of course, exposure to these can lead to dizziness or drowsiness, difficulty concentrating. It can also lead to irritation of the eyes, nose, and throat, and lung irritation and coughing up phlegm, which is referred to as chronic bronchitis. It can also trigger asthma and lead to a chemical pneumonia. And a number of these compounds can contribute to learning disabilities as well as liver and kidney disease. So next slide, please. So all of these, so the health effects, it's very difficult to prove that your health effects are coming from this source. But if a number of people have the health effects, then it lends more weight to that. But what they can't say is that you aren't experiencing odors. And I was previously although I'm a public health, environmental health, and environmental justice physician, I started the Connecticut Coalition for Environmental Justice here in my home state of Connecticut. But I was previously the director of the health department here in Hartford, and before that, the deputy director of the health department in Kansas City, Missouri. And we have laws about nuisances and nuisance odors. And those are the kinds of things that can help to close facilities if they can't get rid of the nuisance odors. So nuisance odors are odors that can affect your health, but that also can affect the quality of life and the general welfare of the population. And they determine whether an odor is a nuisance by the intensity of the odor, how strong it is. So I heard people saying that they could smell the odors from the clothes of people, who are coming in from outside. That means that there's a strong intensity of the odor. Um, and if you can smell it, you should not be able to smell an odor off of the premises. So if you're standing at the sidewalk, you should not be able to smell what's being produced inside. So if the odor comes onto your property, it's a nuisance odor, and the intensity is strong enough to be considered a nuisance. The other issue is about the duration. How long does the odor last? If it's 15 minutes once a month, then that's probably not enough to be a nuisance. But if it's every day, then that's likely to be a nuisance. How do we know the frequency? of the odors. We know it from complaints and inspections by the health department or the environmental agency. And then also the characteristics of a nuisance of an odor makes it a nuisance. If it's a the characteristic we mean, does it smell like tar? Does it smell like burning rubber? Does it, what does it smell like? So those are the characteristics, and these are the things that make it a nuisance. And again, I think that that as an environmental justice, a formerly environmental justice advocate, I think that that it would be important to push these issues because again, the health issues are hard um, to identify as being associated with this. But you should know the health impacts because you can be affected. I do want to say that the determinants of the health impacts and whether you will get the health impacts from the exposure. Those determinations are made generally by studies on workers, on healthy white men in their 20s and 30s. And children do not react the same way that healthy white men do. Women don't react the same way. Elderly people don't react the same way. So even though sometimes and then in addition to being studied one chemical at a time, we need to consider the cumulative impact. You're being exposed to multiple chemicals, not only from this facility, but from all of the traffic, from the industry in your neighborhood. And so who's to say how much a child and people who are exposed to racism and people who are exposed to poverty react to chemicals at lower levels than healthy white males do. So if there are two people who are exposed to the same level of chemicals, and one is a healthy white male in his 20s or 30s, and another is a person.
That's
Uh,
not what we're going to talk
going,
about. This is for chemical. Has nothing to do with it. What it came
uh, uh,
Excuse me, I'm
uh,
sorry. Whoever's talking, we're gonna ask you to hold your comments. Okay, okay, go ahead.
okay.
Dr. Mitchell, continue.
Yeah. So I'm saying that two people exposed to the same level of toxic chemicals, one being a healthy white male, another being a low-income person of color, or child of color. The low-income child of color will have a lot more toxicity than the healthy white male exposed to the same level of chemicals. So although there are standards as to what is considered to be safe level of exposure, it doesn't apply to all people. So I'll stop there and turn it back over to you, Sabrina.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mitchell and Zooks, Dr. Say. We appreciate your expert knowledge on this topic. And next, we're going to go to Abel Russ. And Abel Russ, are you here?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, great.
Thanks.
So you're next in line.
All right, I'm going to be very brief. I work for a group called the Environmental Integrity Project in DC, and we have a Center for Applied Environmental Science that hires consultants to do various things on behalf of different community organizations. And so we were working with a consultant to do some soil sampling around NEP in the neighborhood. And what we found was a little confusing. We found pretty high levels of formaldehyde in the soil everywhere we looked. It was higher in places that were downwind of NEP, but even in the background samples we took, all of the formaldehyde samples were above EPA's soil screening level, which is indicative of a potential problem. And we want to go back and do some more sampling to figure out exactly what's going on there, whether there was maybe something wrong with our sampling and that's why the results were so high, or whether the results are accurate and there really is a soil formaldehyde issue going on in the neighborhood. It would be strange if that were the case, because formaldehyde is not something that lingers in the soil. So we're just not sure what these results mean. But it's interesting that they're consistent with the air sampling. If there's formaldehyde coming out of NEP and there's elevated formaldehyde levels in the air around NEP, and then we find formaldehyde in the soil, it all sort of fits a pattern that is at least troubling. And if I lived right next to NEP, like some of the folks on the phone do, I would be worried about it. I'm not sure that there's a problem. I'm definitely not sure that there's not a problem. We're still in that area where we don't really know, but the fact that the things we do know about NEP combined with what we are still confused about is enough for me to think that this is a problem. And you should just, the basic fact is you shouldn't have a facility like this in a residential neighborhood. There's no reason for it. All they're doing is taking two chemicals and mixing them together to make a third product. You can do that anywhere. There's no reason to do it next door to a family's house in a residential neighborhood, and it should be somewhere else. So we're going to keep track. We're going to keep going on the soil sampling and try to get more data, get better data, and keep looking at the incoming air quality data and see what we can figure out. And that's it for me.
Thanks, Abel. So from our experts, we understand now that there is a problem and we're not going crazy. The NEP is spewing toxins, it's in our air and it's in our soil, and something needs to be done about it. Now we will turn it over to Rosie, who will talk about putting in a 311 complaint about the odor nuisance and how these complaints will help with enforcement. Rosie?
Yeah,
Thanks.
here. Hi, everyone. I'm Rosie Stone. I'm a legal and regulatory analyst at an organization called NAMATI in DC. And as Sabrina said, I'm going to talk briefly about the importance of using 311, which is a DC service that I actually spend a lot of time complaining about, which Sabrina knows well, but it doesn't make it less important. And when it comes to like toxic air and odors from NEP, that 311 is just one of the best tools that we have to force action. So the more complaints we file, the harder it is for the city and for the facility to ignore the community's concerns. Another reason that we wanted to mention this tonight is because recently some DOE staff told us that they haven't received any 311 complaints from residents about NEP in a while, which is a problem because typically DOE isn't able to do inspections without a justification, like a community complaint. And it also doesn't have this, like the staff capacity to do routine inspections. So they rely on complaints to trigger inspections. And every inspection they conduct builds an official record of violations. And if NEP or any facility is shown to be a repeat offender, then the city or a court can impose more serious penalties and potentially force significant changes or even a closure of the facility. So as sort of cumbersome and frustrating as the service can be, sometimes we do want to send in 311 complaints consistently over time when community members are smelling these odors or experiencing the effects of the toxic chemicals from this facility. So yeah, so I am just gonna, the slide is sort of self-explanatory, but I'm just gonna touch on a few things quickly. You have two options for how to submit, two main options for submitting a complaint, an odor complaint with DOEE. You can call 311 and select option 4, which is the option for DOEE. And then during daytime hours, you'll speak to a representative there, or you can leave a message, or you can use this website that we have provided a link to here. You could take a photo of it, or I'm sure we're going to circulate these slides afterward. If you go to the website to file a complaint, you will search for or select DOEE and then this category of general air quality concerns like dust or odors. And then at that point, the website will kind of prompt you to include certain details. So it'll ask you to describe the odor. Are you smelling trash? Are you smelling chemicals? Are you smelling burning tar? That sort of thing. It'll ask you to provide the location and this is important, but it's to mention any health effects that you might be experiencing, like definitely any headache or blurry vision, anything like that. And then once you've submitted the complaint, you'll receive a service request number. Try to save that numbers that you can track it and so that we can track it. A few other things to note. DOEE is required to investigate these odor complaints and should follow up with you after you've done an inspection. But we are also wanting to track the complaints, the complaint number. So if you can text your complaint to Sabrina at her cell phone number that she was nice enough to let me put on this slide, and she and I can follow up with DOEE to request an update about your complaint. I think that, yeah, just the last thing to reiterate is that the reason we're encouraging this is to build that better record of non-compliance issues. We want to use these complaints as evidence to push for stronger enforcement, for policy changes, for other consequences like fines or cease and desist orders to deal with this facility. I think that's it for me. I'll pass it back to you, Sabrina.
Thanks, Rosie. Again, putting in a 311 request is very important. And if you need any help, please contact me and we will help you. We need to put these in as many as possible daily if we can. And you can just call it in, or you can do it online if possible. We want to highlight these photos from the fire just so you all can see the inside of the building during the 2018 fire. And next, we're going to have Connor Shaw from our Councilmember Parker's office. Connor, are you available?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Connor, yep. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Sabrina. Thanks for having me. Good evening, everyone. I'm Connor Shaw with Ward 5 Councilmember Zachary Parker's office. And here just to talk about some legislation that we recently reintroduced, the Ivy City Resilience Hub Eminent Domain Authority Act of 2025. And the purpose of this legislation is to authorize the mayor to use eminent domain, which is a legal procedure that allows the government to take private property for public uses, and in this case, seize the property where NEP is located for use as a resilience hub. This would accomplish a couple of goals. One is obviously to, speed along the end of NEP's operations in Ivy City, which is, the reason we're all here. But two, the city has been looking for a while at resilience hubs as a model for strengthening communities and also helping them weather the various pain points that come with climate change and other things that communities like Ivy City experience, like heat island effects and other environmental stressors that contribute to negative health outcomes in our communities. But it's not just that. It's we have one of these resilience hubs already in existence in Ward 7, and encourage folks to go see it. It is a place where local small businesses might set up shop, either temporarily or permanently, to sort of grow and provide jobs and training for residents. It might be a place where government services are co-located in the community so that folks have good access to the many services that the government provides, but they don't always get to the people who need them most. So the idea is to use this legislation also to push for that kind of facility and ecosystem really to come to Ivy City. So we'd love your support in moving this forward. The way legislation works on the council is that once it's introduced, it gets referred to one of our committees. In this case, it's the Committee on Business and Economic Development, which is chaired by former Ward 5 council member, current at large council member Kenyon McDuffie. And we'd love your help getting in touch with them to schedule this bill for a hearing so we can move it through the process and, put pressure on the mayor and others who have, options that can be brought to bear on the situation to use them. So I'm happy to stop there for the bill. I did just want to mention, though, that we view this as like an all hands on deck approach. We do have another piece of legislation that is aimed more holistically at ensuring that neighborhoods like Ivy City are not exposed to a bunch of different small impacts that collectively add up to, a really untenable situation where you have, lots of trucks and cars on York Avenue. You have DPW facilities across the street from district residents, and that's all on top of facilities like NEP or the rail yards or the Brentwood asphalt plant. And so this legislation would force there to be an accounting for all of those various impacts together before the city moves forward with either re-permitting or new permits for facilities that cause environmental harm and contribute to health effects on our residents. And then the last thing to mention is just we are about to begin the next comprehensive plan. It's not even a rewrite, it's a new comprehensive plan. And that again is another huge opportunity for Ward 5 and district residents everywhere to shape the city's future. And as many folks know, Ward 5 is the place where the city over decades has chosen to concentrate its industrial land. And that is a choice that can be influenced by things like the comprehensive plan. So that process will be kicking off soon. We will be sharing details, as I'm sure Sabrina and Empower DC will as well, about how you can participate in that. But I really encourage folks to be engaged, because we need, there's nothing more impactful than folks in the community who are confronting these problems day in and day out, speaking up and using their voices to call for change. So I'll stop there. Very happy to answer any questions that anybody has about those bills or the comprehensive plan.
Thanks, Connor. Are you going to be around for a couple more minutes?
Yep, I'll be on.
Cool. So as you all have heard that we need engagement in order to make a change, we need engagement. In order to shut this place down, we need engagement. We need, like Connor said, we need everyone to get involved, not only with doing things like attending these info sessions or town halls, helping us with the comprehensive plan. The small area plan has already been done, but once the small area plan guides the comprehensive plan, so we want to make sure that our voices are heard when we're engaging with the comprehensive plan, with the Office of Planning, which they are working to get folks involved as we speak. If you're an ANC commissioner, write a resolution, do a resolution against this place continuing to operate in Ivy City and demand that it's shut down. So testing isn't the only means to tell our story here in our historic community. We're being polluted by cancer-causing toxins, and it's been going on for decades. The existing rules, as we found out, they're not protecting the people and they're not protecting the environment. They're protecting polluting sources. Environmental justice requires listening to the people who are impacted, listening to the people who are being harmed, not the entity that's doing the harm. Getting this facility into compliance, we understand that's like a process that DOEE has to do. But we have a process, and we're going to demand that this place is shut down by any means necessary. Also, we just want to open it up for questions, Q&A, questions and answers. Does anyone have any questions? I think someone was speaking earlier. Please put your questions in the chat or raise your hand, and we're just going to spend a couple of minutes doing that.
And we did want to create a little space if there's any Ivy City residents who have a comment based on how this is impacting you, or just what it feels like to learn more about these chemicals that you know are in the community. We want to make sure to create space for Ivy City residents first. And I know there are some of you on the call, but we're not putting anyone on the spot. So I'm not sure that Sabrina mentioned when in her introduction, but Sabrina is an Ivy City resident. She's the elected ANC commissioner as well for Ivy City, and Empower DC's Ivy City organizer. So she is well qualified to speak as well.
Thanks, Carissa.
One comment in the chat, I just want to confirm that NEP does not have an air permit. You want to speak to that, Sabrina?
NEP does not have an air permit. They have no air permit, never had an air permit. They have a certificate of occupancy, and that's it.
This facility was so-called grandfathered in, and that means that they were put there before some of the current laws were in place, right? So current zoning laws would not allow this right next door to residential homes, right? Current air quality laws require permits. We've gotten a little bit of mixed messages from Department of Environment about whether they're going to require a permit of NEP at all. But supposedly they are in the process now of having to comply with an odor control plan, and that may require some permits. But again, we're kind of, lukewarm on compliance issues when really this is a justice issue, and there's nothing you can do to minimize the odor at NEP that makes it okay to have it next to people's homes. Another comment, would the current owners be willing to sell it to the community? Sabrina, what do you want to respond?
Well, I don't know about selling it. They won't even talk to the community, actually. They won't have a meeting with the community. They won't answer our questions. They're only speaking with DOEE and EPA, but we're looking forward to that space to be used as a Ward 5 community hub. And yes,
Yeah.
we have a fact sheet. I saw that pop up real quick. We do have a fact sheet. We have a lot of information. We have pages and pages and pages of information. We just didn't do this overnight. There's been a lot of research, a lot of studying, and a lot of meetings. And so, yes, we do have a fact sheet. If you would like one, just let us know. It should be some information on the back of the flyer that you received also.
Yeah, we'll do a follow-up email, and in that we can send a fact sheet, talking points for hopefully calls you'll make or emails you'll send. And also there is a short film that Namati helped produce on this issue. It's on our YouTube page. It's called Ivy City, People Rising Ivy City, and it is specifically about this issue. Ruby asked, what is an air permit? Thank you for that, Ruby, because we are also expanding our work around just air quality and education around air quality and engagement. And yeah, the city literally gives permits for pollution, right? So there's like entities around the city that get a permit for polluting. And it's quite crazy in large part because most of the time residents have no idea it's happening, right? One of the things that we've been trying to do is help connect the impacted communities and residents with the lawyers and the scientists and others to help even navigate that process, because it's really difficult. But the bill that Connor talked about that would create cumulative impact analysis would then for the first time require that when they give those permits, they don't look at just one entity at a time. They look cumulatively. How many of them are there in this area, right? And that is not done right now, crazy enough, right? So that would be very important. There is a question about, has there been any legal challenges to DC's grandfathering clause? I'm not sure. That's a good question. We'll have to ask some of our lawyer friends to look into more. We are looking at whether there's an opportunity to expand the usage of eminent domain to not just address NEP, but to address other polluters that have been grandfathered in. And what I have been told about DC's grandfathering clause is that when the city did it, they didn't put any time limit on it. So some jurisdictions allow something to grandfather for a limited amount of time, but then eventually it has to comply with the new laws. And evidently we didn't have that here. So any other, let's see. Do we have any idea what the cleanup cost would be for the toxic site? No, we don't yet. We don't have that yet. Yes, if we ask our ANCs to write resolutions, what are we asking? Yes, to support the 2 pieces of legislation. Yes, that would be it. And we can provide a draft. So we'll make sure we get that out as well. Yes, Corey's film we will put on YouTube as well. Yes, the history is very important. Who owns the company? Who buys the product? How is the product used? So this is a white family that has, and I think it's important to talk about this because again, it's like a white family that was able to create generational wealth while harming and creating generational trauma in a Black community, right? And so the Petersons, this is literally a company where, in 1930 something, a man, Mr. Peterson, created this company. And then when he passed away, his wife took it over. When she passed away, their daughter took it over. And now she's passed away. And actually, we have no idea who's actually the president of the company or the owner of the company. There's a woman named Nicole Barksdale, who's the president of the company, who lives in Pawleys Island, South Carolina. But from what we know, and they have a website, if somebody wants to put the link in the chat, they have a website and you can look at it. their products are for high heat usage. It's adhesives that are used by the Navy and entities like the Navy in high heat settings, right? So something that might be in a mechanical use within an engine, or in some types of usage like that. So it's a very specialized product. We have been trying to determine if there's still a link between the company and the Navy. We haven't been able to find any current contracts, but there is certainly a long history of that connection. Let's see. I'm trying to see if I'm. So I think we've got most of, there's a couple of suggestions in here. A copy of the video, yes. List of other ways that eminent domain has been used in DC that have caused harm, yes. Basis for testimony, yes. Thank you, Janavi, for the link. So are we all in agreement that this relic of environmental racism has had its days are over? Are we in agreement? Yes, thank you. And I know many of you have already, done things to support the community. We've had rallies, and we've had our health and science experts. And I think, I'll just say one last thing. Our experience working with DOEE, working with EPA, trying to see, okay, if we have these agencies involved and they say they're going to do the testing and all of that, will that, will this get to a solution? We've been doing this for 2 years now. It's been a dead end. And it really just underscores how the standards in place, the laws in place were not created to protect communities like Ivy City, and therefore they cannot be the standard by which action is determined. And we keep having EPA say to us, well, we haven't identified enough a health hazard, or a human hazard. So on one hand, we're saying, oh, we're going to work on environmental justice, and on the other hand, we're going to use the same laws and policies that were created without an environmental justice framework to determine action. So these things, obviously don't correlate, and now now EPA will be even less effective given what's happening. So we're taking this through, I think, the council, and we want to appreciate Zachary Parker for stepping up and saying, we used every other avenue possible. Even somebody from OAG, the Office of Attorney General, was on the call tonight. Even their office, we keep getting this message of, they're not violating any laws because the laws are not just. The laws are not on our side, right? So they can't figure out a way to close it down. This is where eminent domain is a creative strategy. And again, that poetic justice, I think Jim mentioned in the chat, to not only shut it down, but turn it into a resilience hub that can help usher in a new era of doing green jobs, workforce development, and pollution prevention, and other things to improve health and environment in Ivy City. I'll turn it back to you, Sabrina.
Thanks, Parisa. So with that said, I know everybody has been filled up with a lot of information, but it's a lot of important information because this is actually going on in the nation's capital, and it's going on in our community, and we're suffering every day. Please put in a 311 request if you come in the area. We have some places where people tend to go. Just stop by and take a smell, and I guess that will authenticate your 311 request. Also, if you want to join Empower DC, please let us know, and make sure your information is in the chat so we can reach out to you. We're going to have advocacy days, which we will be going to the Wilson Building and speaking with our council members in person. If you would like to join us for that, please give us your contact information, reach out to me, text me, or email one of us and let us know that you want to participate in that campaign. Also, We're gonna have press events. We're gonna do pickets. Please don't let this be the last time we see you. Okay? We want to see you. We want everybody in on this because this should not be happening. If they feel like it can happen in Ivy City, then they feel like a lot of things can happen all over the city, and that we don't want. So I'm hoping there's some ANCs on this call, so that you can talk to your constituents and let them know that this is going on in our city. Also, we have the performance oversight hearings that have started. If you need help with your testimony, we can help you there. If you've been testifying over the years, please, DOEE's hearing is on the 21st. We want to testify at Department of Health, and we definitely want to testify when the eminent domain bill come up, and we'll let you all know. So that's it for us. Is there a burning question? And we will let you all get back to your night. Just a burning question, something that you think that can help us, or something that, a word of encouragement, anything.
Sabrina, just noticing the last comment in the chat from Aaron, saying that I hope to see movement this comp plan cycle to address concentration of industrial land and its impacts. Thanks, Aaron. That is one of our top priorities. Folks who don't know about the comp plan yet, we will be having information sessions on that and forming a group among our members to work on anti-displacement and environmental justice priorities through the comprehensive plan. And this is the 20-year plan that guides land use and development in the city, particularly zoning, right? So it's a forward-looking, long-term vision piece, but we have to set the tone for the future land use as well. So.
And not the developers. We don't want the developers to set the tone. So, and this involves the whole city, not just Ivy City, but the whole entire city. So please get involved in the planning of your communities. And we have some Howard University students.
Yes, and Dr. Amy from Howard is here as well, and some students. So lots of great partners. Thank you all so much. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Look out for our follow-up emails, and hopefully we'll see you real soon.
Thank you.
All right, good night, everybody.
Good night.